Thank you so much for being here. I am super excited to be here to talk to you about this topic, which is what does Filecoin mean for developers? And specifically in this venue, which is Filecoin Liftoff Week. So amazing. All of the sessions so far have just been really incredible. I feel like I've been working on this project for many years, and I'm learning so much from everyone in the amazing Filecoin ecosystem. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and talk to you about Filecoin for developers. So today I'm going to go through 4 major areas, starting with first, just really quick recap of what is Filecoin. You've been hearing about this a lot, so we're not going to spend too much time here. I'll spend a little bit more time talking about why you should consider building in the Filecoin ecosystem and some of the unique features of Filecoin that make it really compelling for a lot of use cases. I'll talk about a few specific case studies that are using Filecoin or building in the Filecoin ecosystem in really interesting ways. And then lastly, I'll leave you with some resources and some tips on how to get started if you are excited and ready to dive in. So first, what is Filecoin? You've probably been hearing about this a lot throughout the course of this week, but I'll reiterate it here because it's just really important, and for me has been something that has guided my work and my motivation and passion for this project for the last several years. This is the mission of Filecoin. It's to create a decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation for humanity's information. And to that end, Filecoin is a number of things. Filecoin goes about achieving this mission in a number of different ways. And Filecoin, you may have heard a lot about it as a decentralized storage network, and that is kind of the primary purpose of existence for Filecoin. But it's not just that. It's a storage network. It's a specification of a number of decentralized storage protocols that make a network like this work. It's a payment mechanism. It's the native medium of exchange for transactions on the decentralized storage network that is also Filecoin. And it's also a really thriving ecosystem. And today we're going to focus more, most of our energy on what Filecoin is like as a decentralized storage network, but you'll see pieces of the rest of this play through as well. So really at a very high level, Filecoin is a marketplace, and it matches clients who want storage services with storage miners who provide these storage services. And the network manages the interactions between these two sides of the market. So initially, when a storage client comes to the Filecoin network, they decide which storage miners they want to make their storage deals with. So, which miners will be storing their data. And they make this choice weighing across a number of different dimensions, like the price that miners are offering. It could also be the geography in which these miners are located. It could be their available storage capacity. It could just be offline relationships. Maybe they know these people from the real world somewhere that's not just within the Filecoin network. But in any case, clients are choosing which miners to make their storage deals with. And once a storage deal is made, the client transfers their data to the miners, and they also lock up Filecoin tokens in payment channels to pay the miners for successful storage of the client's data over time. The Filecoin protocol regularly asks miners to generate proofs, which it's a custom proof called proofs of spacetime, which are used to verify that these miners are actually doing what they're saying they're doing, which is storing the data correctly over time. And after miners send their proofs of spacetime to the network protocols and contracts will pay the miners the correct amount of Filecoin tokens over time, sort of proportionally. In order for this whole system to work, clients need to trust that the storage proofs work as intended and that the network protocols incentivize honest behavior on behalf of all of the participants in the system. And in Filecoin, we do this by relying on secure cryptographic proofs and crypto economic mechanisms to ensure that all participants in the network are behaving honestly. This entire protocol design is intended to ensure that a client can send real money to pay for storage on a decentralized network and have guarantees that for all practical purposes, like basically with 100% guarantee, their data is being stored correctly. I mentioned this really briefly, but when we talk about the decentralized storage network, there are a few main roles that participants in the network can play. They can be clients who want storage, and this is a little bit simplified, but we actually use the term clients to refer to retrieval users as well, or retrieval clients. And so clients are the entities, sort of the demand side of the network, that want storage and retrieval services from the network. Miners are the suppliers on the network, and they provide these storage and retrieval services. And then there's a huge number of core developers in the ecosystem, as well as other partners and other teams that are just building really, really valuable tooling and products and all sorts of services to make the Filecoin ecosystem really thrive. So that's kind of a brief overview of what Filecoin is and how to think about the different roles that people can play in this ecosystem. I wanted to spend some time talking about why you should consider building within the Filecoin ecosystem and what Filecoin offers for you. I really believe that Filecoin is the decentralized storage network for Web3 and beyond. Filecoin's unique design and core features just enable a host of really, really valuable benefits for users and developers. And so I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about what some of these core features and benefits are. One of the core features of Filecoin is this idea that the network can create differentiated granular storage markets. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but just contrast this to the way that the world of cloud storage works today, in which we tend to think of storage in general, and certainly cloud storage, as a heavily commoditized asset. And what's really interesting about Filecoin is that storage begins to become more differentiated. You can have miners on the network differentiating themselves on the basis of factors like price, and some of these I mentioned before, so price, location. It can also include things that, such as miner SLA. And as a client on the network, you get to choose between these different options. And over time, what this does, the fact that Filecoin is a two-sided marketplace for storage and retrieval services, it leads to efficiency in the market, where we see better matching between the demand side needs and the supply side services. It also leads to competitive pricing, which is really interesting. There's this product that was very recently launched just a few days ago. It's by the Codify team, and this product is called Storage. And there are a number of products like this, but this is just one example that shows you how we can start to see this differentiation within the Filecoin storage market, where instead of going to a central interface and just choosing to sign up for S3, like standard standard service, like standard SLA, standard pricing for a storage service, you can choose between a number of different miners who have different prices that they're charging for their storage capacity. And this particular product is really interesting because it also takes a number of on-chain variables to construct a reputation score for different miners. And you can see some interesting details here as well about particular miners, like where they're located, how much power they have in the network. It looks like this particular miner hasn't accepted any deals yet, but is offering a really, really competitive storage rate pricing. And so, maybe consider making a deal with this miner. But I think that this is, really, really interesting, because you might start to see more of these services exist in the Filecoin network, and we're already starting to see some of these come to life, where miners are no longer just differentiating themselves on some of the factors that are inherent to the network and to the chain, but also things that can be maybe verified at a layer 2 layer, or like just off chain, such as, is this miner or this facility GDPR compliant or HIPAA compliant? And they could use services like this to advertise that fact to potential clients who are looking for trustworthy miners to store their data with. So I think that this is, a really interesting thing. It's never before been done, this idea of just these like hypergranular storage markets. And that leads to, I think, much better solutions for any individual user or developer's storage needs. This second really interesting core feature of Filecoin is this idea of verified storage. So in my brief introduction to how Filecoin works, we saw how the network protocols will repeatedly ask miners on the network to generate proofs that are stamped into the Filecoin blockchain that show that this miner has actually been storing data correctly over time. So this is interesting for a number of reasons. It kind of is an audit trail. It's both necessary for the protocol to function, but it can also, because all of this data is in the blockchain, it can also be used as an audit trail for the public world for certain use cases, where being able to show, data provenance and saying, okay, this is when this particular file was instantiated in the world, and you can actually see in block X on the Filecoin blockchain, this is the storage proof and the content hash that shows that this data was actually stored and existed, in fact, at this moment in time in block X. That sort of thing is really useful we've seen a number of libraries and archives and even services like medical services and legal services that are interested in providing this sort of audit trail for their various official records and documents. But what's also really interesting about this feature is I think it has a lot of potential to fight some of the really negative effects we're seeing in the world today around misinformation. When you store a piece of data onto the Filecoin network, because the storage proof is stamped into the Filecoin blockchain at a particular moment in time, if anyone down the road ever tries to doctor that piece of data or edit it in some way and pass that off as the original, there is proof that is publicly verifiable that shows that, in fact, this version of this particular piece of data that came later is actually not the legitimate, the original copy of this piece of information. And, we're still in really, really early days, but I think this is something that our entire space cares about a lot. And I'm really excited to see applications that make use of this feature over the next few months and years. We recently published a blog post about this particular feature of Filecoin on the Filecoin blog. So if you're interested in this, you can definitely check this out. And then another core feature of Filecoin is this idea of pricing control. So just in the way that, the ability, Filecoin works as this two-sided marketplace where miners can advertise via asks how much they are willing to sell their storage capacity for. Clients on the network can also indicate via their deal proposals that they make to miners how willing they are to pay, how much basically they're willing to pay for storage on the network with this particular miner. And so I think this is a really amazing feature because what it means is that you as a user on this network, whether as a client or a miner, have complete control over how much you're actually paying to store data on the network. And that means that at the end of the day, you're only entering into economic contracts that are affordable for you. If a miner is too expensive, just try to find someone else. And as the network matures, we're going to see much more differentiation on the miner side, much more options for clients to choose to store with miners who meet their needs, including pricing needs and affordability needs. Another core feature of Filecoin is this idea of data persistence. So Filecoin is, a fully peer-to-peer network. And however, unlike many of the peer-to-peer storage networks that have existed in the world before, because of Filecoin's core cryptocurrency or its incentive layer, Filecoin incentivizes storage providers on the network to actually store data over long periods of time. So you no longer have to rely on altruistic storage providers in the network who are storing this data because they really believe in it. Maybe they believe in the power of that particular network. But now this is, because of this incentive layer, it allows this network to function more trustlessly. And just like many of the services that exist in the world today, you can pay for something and sort of expect that it will stick around or that the network will behave as intended. So I think this feature is really, really valuable, especially in today's where Web3 is today, because we're starting to see the need for much more professional, much more reliable and robust data storage foundations in Web3. And because of this data persistence feature, which is just fundamental to how Filecoin is built and what it's developed for, we, I think, are going to start seeing more of these really robust storage foundations that can support production applications in Web3. And then the last major feature that I wanted to highlight is that the Filecoin protocol, just like all of the various IPFS protocols and many other protocols in the space now that deal with decentralized storage, makes use of content addressing. And so what this means, many of you are probably already familiar with this, but Filecoin basically uses content hashes or we call them CIDs, content identifiers, to reference all data that is stored on the Filecoin network. And this has the same benefits within the Filecoin world that it has in the IPFS world, which means that Filecoin is resilient to broken links and to many of the other fragilities that exist with the status quo of a location addressed web. So this is kind of a brief recap of what are the core features that we talked about. And I just wanted to say that whether you choose to use Filecoin for data storage, or you're just more interested in having using Filecoin for its payment mechanism capabilities, or if you're just interested in building tools, I mean, this ecosystem is so early. If you're interested in building tools to make the ecosystem much friendlier for developers and filling a lot of the holes that do exist to make this a really, really robust storage solution for the world, and maybe starting with Web3, there's so much opportunity. And this whole week is about just reminding all of us that there's so much that has happened, but this is just the very, very, very beginning. And the time is now to build really great things. That's this, just a reminder for all of us. This is just the beginning, and there's so much opportunity and so much to do. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about some of the really interesting projects that are actually starting to use Filecoin as this robust storage layer for a number of different use cases. And so yes, I wanted to start with a few short case studies. Okay, so the first case study is about a little project called Filecoin Discover. So I'm not sure how many folks know, but we generate an insane amount of data every single day. I pulled this stat a little while ago, and at the time, humanity collectively was generating something like 2.5 quintillion bytes a day, which is just a staggering number. I think they tried to do the math, and it's something like several shipping containers full of 8 terabyte hard drives, like dozens of shipping containers full of 8 terabyte hard drives that are being created just every single day. It includes 294 billion emails, 64 billion WhatsApp messages, 500 million tweets, climate science reports, disease tracking maps, connected car coordinates, and just really so much more. It's just a staggering amount of data. And while much of this data is stored and preserved, it is also true that millions of gigabytes worth of useful data, and especially useful scientific data, are actually routinely discarded every single day. At Filecoin, and just on this project, we just believe that throwing away useful data is a sad lost opportunity for our society, and we want Filecoin to be the home for this sort of data. If stored and analyzed, this data could be super valuable, could yield priceless research and insights and discoveries. So this is just something that's been really core to the mission of Filecoin. I mentioned before in the first slide about Filecoin wants to be the foundation for all of humanity's most important information, and this definitely is part of that goal. So several months ago, we started a project called Filecoin Discover to preserve some of the most important public access data sets that exist in the world today. And here's a snapshot of some of those data sets. So far through this program, we've stored more than 3 petabytes of open access data on the network. And this is, again, just like a staggering amount of data. And doing this in a really coordinated effort through one program was a very significant undertaking, through which we learned a lot about what it means, to store massive data sets on the Filecoin network. The good news is that it's possible today, and through months of effort from a lot of really talented people, there are all sorts of resources now that explain exactly how you can do this. And one interesting thing that many of you may know, it's basically impossible to transfer this much data just through the internet. So all of this data was transferred via hard drives to miners on the network. So some of the screenshots here, the wonderful team that was behind this Discover project did a really great presentation a few weeks ago on how exactly they processed the data for storage on the Filecoin network. It made use of this feature that exists within the Lotus implementation for Filecoin, which is called the offline data transfer feature. And we also have a blog post about this in documentation about how you can make use of this feature. And one other really interesting thing about this Discover project is there's very soon there will be a retrieval portal where anyone in the world can just search through all of the data sets that were stored as part of this initiative and retrieve pieces of this data. And so it's very much, the intent is not just to store this data on the network, but make it usable and preserve it for generations to come. This is one, I believe this is the recording that I was mentioning. So there's a link here as well for where you can find this information about how to prepare large data sets for storage on the network. But the main point of this particular case study is just to say this today is possible and it's been done. We've seen petabytes of storage hit the Filecoin network. And so if your particular use case wants to make use of public open access data sets, or you want to just preserve and archive massive amounts of really valuable data that you would otherwise throw away, Filecoin can be the home for that type of use case as well. And another project that I wanted to talk about was Slate. And I think, Juan mentioned this in his opening talk, and we'll actually be hearing from Jimmy, who's the lead for this project, later today as well, about how, a deep dive into how they built Slate. But this is just, such a beautiful project with a team built by a team that's extremely passionate about Filecoin and IPFS and textile and just all of the technologies that make this space so wonderful and so usable. But Slate is really intending to be a just easy to use, best in class experience for uploading your personal data, just individuals being able to upload their personal data to a network like Filecoin. And I actually wanted to do a quick demo of how Slate works. Everyone should definitely go and check this out. It's super easy to create an account and give it a whirl. But yeah, I just wanted to give a quick demo here. So this is my personal, oops, it's a bit of a sneak preview. This is my personal Slate account. And as you can see, there are a number of different features here, including the ability to directly interact with the Filecoin network or make a one-off Filecoin storage deal. And what I wanted to show was this idea of being able to create a slate, which Jimmy can say much more about this, but it's essentially just a collection, an individual collection of data and files that you find really interesting that you maybe think are related to each other in some way. So I wanted to create a slate about that I'm calling developers, because developers are great and there's just lots of really awesome stuff online that is geared towards developers. So I'm going to create a slate, and currently this is empty, but I have this file that I'm going to just drag and drop onto the interface to upload it to this slate. And what's happening behind the scenes here is this file is getting staged. It is currently, it has been uploaded to the IPFS network, and it's also going to be staged for upload to the Filecoin network as well. And this is, just a classic GIF about developers. And the cool thing is that you can actually share. There's also just a public URL for slates that is just created automatically. So, I could take this link and share it with anyone in the world, and they could see my slate and create their own if they wanted. So that's a really, really quick demo of Slate. You should try it out. It's at slate.host. And I wanted to highlight this use case in particular because Slate, as you saw, it's a web app. It exists in the browser, and you can actually build applications now that do store data to, it's long been true in IPFS, but it's also now true in the Filecoin case, just through using some of these technologies. And one particular technology that we have well documented in the Filecoin documentation is called Filecoin-backed IPFS pinning services. One instance of like an FPS service that exists today is textile buckets, which is what Slate is backed by. But there are more that are in the works currently with some providers that, if you're in the IPFS ecosystem already, you probably know and love, such as Pinata and ChainSafe. And the way that FPS services work, it's just it's like a hosted service. It's kind of like it's just like an IPFS pinning service, and then many of these services now expose these features as well to also store your user data or your application data to the Filecoin network. Slate is a really cool project because it's also completely open source and has a design system, which not only includes some of the really beautiful components that are used to make the app, but also has tutorials about how you can use some of these core APIs from the Textile Buckets product to store your data to the Filecoin network through a web application or other type of application. And as I mentioned, Jimmy is going to be talking a little bit more about how he and the team built Slate later today. So you should definitely check that out. And then the last example that I wanted to highlight is a project called Query. So if you've been in the IPFS ecosystem for for a while, you may have heard of this project and this team. It's an amazing project, and as it says here, Query is the home for version data sets on the web. And just like the Filecoin project really loves open access data sets or just publicly useful data sets, which is a big focus for the team. So over the last few months, the Query team has also been working on creating a Filecoin integration for their service. And it looks like this. This is, it's accessible at this link. But basically what the team has done is basically create this scheduler, which I think it says here every month. I think it's run a little bit more regularly than every month. But on some regular basis, the scheduler will basically take the entire data store for all of Query data sets, which are currently also hosted on the IPFS network, and will archive these to the Filecoin network too. And the Query team has created this really helpful set of this. This is essentially a tutorial. It's kind of like walking through each of the steps of this process, but it also includes code snippets and so on, so you can see how to do something like this for yourself in your application. And Query is making use of another really awesome developer tool that's built by the Textile team, which is called Powergate. And Powergate is a multi-tiered storage solution, which makes use of IPFS and Filecoin networks. I think this picture is a little bit outdated, but you can kind of see this. The central box is the Powergate daemon and a bunch of the different modules that it runs to make just storage to the IPFS and Filecoin networks really seamless and easy. It also is configured to work with IPFS nodes and Lotus node to interact with the Filecoin network. And we've seen a number of teams that have really just been using Powergate all over the place and have found a tremendous amount of value in it. And in addition to just the core Powergate solution that exists, the Textile team now offers these hosted Powergate solutions. So this is, as it's written here, all the benefits of Powergate without having to host your own nodes. If you know anything about running blockchain nodes, it can be really finicky. It's really easy to lose really important data. So sometimes it's nice to have rails around your nodes so that it's just much easier to build your application without having to deal with all the infrastructural challenges of running blockchain nodes. And so these are just a few projects. As you may have seen throughout the course of the last few days, there are hundreds of teams that are building within the IPFS and Filecoin ecosystems. And there's just a lot of, most of them are open source. There's just so much out there that if you're just getting started in this ecosystem, you can take a lot of inspiration from and learn from how these projects have been built and use that as kind of a getting started guide for yourself. But really quickly before we end, I wanted to make it a little bit easier by just pointing you to some resources that we think are really good starting points for developers who are interested in building in this ecosystem. The first is obviously the Filecoin documentation site. So this contains a lot of developer-specific material. It includes documentation for anyone who's interested in using Filecoin, but it points to a number of the developer tools that I mentioned in this presentation, and also a number of others that I did not mention by name. There's also the Filecoin spec, which is this really detailed document which describes all of the Filecoin protocols, how they work. It's intended to be a guide for implementers of Filecoin protocol implementations, but I have actually found it to be extremely useful if you're running into something maybe not so intuitive as you're interacting with the Filecoin network. It can be a really valuable resource to just dive into a specific area and see what's going on. And it's just really cool because Filecoin is an amazing protocol, and the spec describes how it works in a really awesome level of detail. The next resource is Protoschool, which Protoschool has been making these really great tutorials for IPFS and multi-formats for the last several years. And recently there are also these really great tutorials on Filecoin as well. So folks should definitely take a look at Protoschool. And then we also have a number of really valuable resources in the form of video from some of the events and just programs that have run over the last few months. So I'll just go through a couple of these. One was the IPFS Pinning Summit. And so this talks about, if you're interested in building infrastructure within the Filecoin ecosystem, this playlist will have some like really interesting talks for you to take a look at. There are also a series of Filecoin masterclasses that we've put together on topics that are useful for developers and various developer tools that exist in the ecosystem. HackFest was a hackathon that ran a few months ago and also produced a number of really valuable Filecoin related developer resources. And this is just a snapshot of a few of them, but there are many more. And the HackFest, this is specific to Filecoin, but there were a number of other developer tools for IPFS and Filecoin that were also surfaced during HackFest that I would recommend people take a look at. And then we've been running, I'll talk about this briefly in a few minutes, but we've been running this competition for community developers and storage clients in the Filecoin ecosystem to store as much valuable data as they can to the network. And alongside that program, we've also seen a number of folks just produce really, really great content on, again, some of the same developer tools that I've mentioned, or examples of how they built specific projects, like the Discover project, or another project that the OB1 team built, which was storing package manager registries on Filecoin, and there are a number of others as well. So I think this is also a really great resource if you're looking to get started. If you're at the very beginning of your journey, the steps that I would recommend are to start by visiting the Filecoin documentation site, downloading, installing, and setting up a Lotus node, and then familiarizing yourself with Filecoin, how Filecoin funds work, and value transfers, how storage and retrieval deals work. And I would recommend that you start by doing this probably on a local network first. You can just create a little mini network on your development machine, or if you feel like you're ready to try a live network, you can also try to run through these flows on a testnet. And then once you've gotten familiar with some of the core mechanics of Filecoin and how it works, then I would recommend that you start investigating the various tools that exist that can make the development process a lot easier. And again, these will be listed on the Filecoin documentation site, includes Powergate buckets and just dozens of other tools. But I think Filecoin today, this is liftoff week. We're at the very, very, very beginning. A lot of tools already exist, which I think is amazing given where we are in the life cycle of this project, but it's still early days. And so if you want to start building production applications on the network, I think you should take a look at the tools that exist to make this process really easy, or even consider building some of these tools yourself, because you may see core bits of developer tooling and infrastructure that are needed that don't exist today. And that could be a really, really valuable place to be contributing to this ecosystem. And if you run into trouble along the way, we have a ton of people on our team who are, in the Filecoin Slack workspace, and that's just, you can sign up for an account at filecoin.io/Slack. Feel free to join there and ask any questions at all that you may have about how to build on the network. And the last thing I'll plug is that this Slingshot competition that I mentioned is an ongoing program. Actually, phase 1 for this competition ended just today. And in the course of this competition, there were more than 400 teams that competed and stored collectively more than 700 tebibytes of data. But this competition is ongoing. It's going to be running for the next several months. And so it's never too late to participate. If you're interested in storing data on the network, you should totally participate in this competition. In fact, you'll almost be enrolled by default, and then you have to just register so that you can claim the Filecoin rewards that accrue to you as you are using the network. My last reminder here is just, this is just the beginning. Really, really, really excited to be with you in this ecosystem and begin just building everything that's necessary in order for this, for Filecoin and this ecosystem to achieve its mission of being a foundation for all of humanity's information going forward. Thank you.